Welcome, everybody, to the Psychology Social Hour by St. Joseph Museums. My name is Shelley Haynes, and we have a special guest with us tonight. Before I introduce him, I would like to read a disclaimer to you. This free virtual series features an educational program on a topic of mental health. The event is for generalized information and is in no way a form of diagnosis. Please consult with your doctor or therapist for specific medical or psychological advice. We are merely starting the discussion to help destigmatize mental health. Mental illness, symptoms, diagnosis, and treatment methods are all a highly individualized process. And with that, I would like to introduce our guest tonight, Mr. Demetrius Chance. He has done many things in his time on this earth, and most recently has founded a program called Diversified Perspectives, which I hope he will talk about. And he also has created a program called Elementary Mindset Roadmap to Mental Health Freedom, which I hope he talks about as well. Welcome, Demetrius.
Yes, it's a pleasure. It's an honor being here. When with elementary mindset, we could start there.
Okay.
Elementary mindset. Um, it's a 6-week program that I actually constructed based on the elements of human dynamics. So it actually aims at the personal growth of individuals. It's designed to empower, inspire, and motivate people through mental health assignments, internalized assessments, getting people to actually go take more of a deep dive through the psychological and emotional traumas that they're experiencing within their lives. A lot of times we talk about mental health, but mental health has been so stigmatized. And I tell people all the time, we use the word mental health and we use the word mental illness all in the same, when in fact they're two totally different things. But when you look at and analyze society, is no different than how people think about psychology, and they automatically assume that, oh, if a person is in psychology, they're in mental health or they're in the mental illness spectrum of it. And it's just like, no, there's abnormal psychology, there's environmental psychology. So it just goes to getting people, breaking it down to where the general public and where others, businesses can actually comprehend and start actually working on their mental health battles, the things that they struggle with. And I know I had sent you the program. Exact. How did you? Can I get your opinion real quick on what did you think about it?
I think it's a really good program. It's been a little while since I perused it, but as far as written curriculum, I think it's really defining. And I noticed that you're doing it now with Open Door. Is that
Yes,
correct?
Open Door Kitchen.
Yeah. How is that going?
It's going. It's going. The one thing about the Open Door Kitchen, I've been homeless. Living in North Carolina, I used to sleep on my dad's grave. So walking around the communities and just analyzing people, I was by myself. So it was just analyzing different dynamics, understandings of people. So then it started making me to actually just turn that reflection and that viewpoint back on myself. So when we're looking at therapy, uh, therapy, when you break it down, therapy is having a trained professional to help you through your emotional trauma, your emotional experiences. The purpose of therapy is to help remove the emotion out of whatever you're battling and actually get into how to solve, how to conquer. But a lot of times in society, we get mixed up with the different dialogues and the different understandings that we forget to go back to the basics. And again, with elementary mindset, it takes a person through that. Week two, we're talking about connections and emotional attachments. So when I ask people, and even the people that are joining or that are looking on this, when you look at your life, what are the emotional connections that you have within your life? What are the battles? How well are your relationships? With me and with Open Door Food Kitchen, I remember I was telling them as a kid, I didn't have friends. I was adopted. I remember, and I was a mentally ill kid. During that time, I didn't realize it, but when I look at it now, I can see why it was there was a difference. But when I started assessing my childhood, my dad raised rabbits. So growing up, we used to raise them, we used to sell them, we used to eat them. It was just something away. My dad was a paraplegic in North Carolina. So it was one of his many passions. So because I didn't have friends, I would walk outside and I used to have a stick and I used to pretend that the rabbits was my congregation. And I had always put in my mind, like, when I get older, I'm going to be that impactful speaker. Me and Martin Luther King Jr. actually shared the exact same birthday, January the 15th.
Wow.
So he became an idol. So when I would read up on him and he was in the church and the ministry and he was so prolific, I used to walk around and the rabbits was my community. Then growing up, being sexually assaulted, finding out the truth about my adoption, having life play out, I started analyzing, okay, I didn't think the way that I felt I should now. Back then, certain things. So then it made me start looking at people in society. How many times do we look back on our lives, even things that we can't control? And it builds that emotion, that regret, that disappointment, not realizing that that manifests. So when you're looking at the connections and emotional attachments, okay, I didn't have anyone. I wanted to be a speaker. Why? Because that's when I felt during that time I would be accepted. So then, how does that look as it plays out through life? I started attaching myself to any and everyone that I felt would accept me. Looking and analyzing life through an emotional perspective versus stepping back and saying, is this person good for me? Is there any beneficial characteristics? Am I gaining? So when I have people look at their lives, what are the type of connections that they have? And do they understand where it came from? A lot of times we see it in abusive relationships where we could tell the person, you need to leave, you need to go, it's toxic. And we're trying to rationalize. But it seems, especially that person that's stuck within that situation, it becomes a reprobated mindset. They keep going back to that person. It's like the more we tell you not to, the more it pushes you. Why? Because of the emotional attachment. And a lot of times I ask people, what void did that person fill in your life? Because for you to have such an emotional attachment, knowing and seeing the logic in front of you, what would make you still turn from logic? Your emotional response.
Sure.
It's not until that person, and I tell them, then fast forward when that same type of person finally decides to leave that situation, to leave that partner, if they're bitter, if they're upset, if they're still battling the emotion, what do you hear them say? Oh, he's good for nothing. We tried to tell you that. Oh, he's a cheater. Yeah, we tried to tell you that too. You had to literally deplete yourself of every emotion until you were forced to see logic. So when I started to analyze society, how many people battle with that on a daily basis? How many people refuse to see logic because they're so overwhelmed with emotion? Emotion allowed us to put blinders. So then we start making excuses because now we're dealing with feeling versus assessing how is this going to be beneficial. So going back to the open door food kitchen, when we covered emotional attachments this week, one of the biggest things I was asking them is they need to go back to who they are, not the person, because yes, that person could have did whatever they did to you. They could have hurt you in whatever manner. However, when I looked and I assessed my life, even though those people did that, I allowed them to.
Mm-hmm.
I put myself in that position. I trusted when I shouldn't. I did when I shouldn't. And it opened the door for them to do whatever they did. So it always comes back to human accountability. So when we're talking about bettering mental health, when we're talking about changing and empowering and better ourselves as society, should we look more at systems or start more looking at the system within our own understanding?
Okay. Very good question. So,
But with that, I also teach them like how to create an eco map
what
and
is an
social
eco
work.
map?
And an eco map is a representation. It's a visual representation of all the systems that are impacting an individual's lives.
Wonderful.
So what I have them to do is I have them to write their name in the center of a sheet of paper and circle it. And then they create their own Venn diagram of all the emotional connections they have, whether it's people, whether it's parents, whether it's friends, family, it could be a pet, it could be even with the homeless population, it could be memorabilia, it could be values that was passed on.
Mhm.
What is your connection to that? If I have a weird or if I have a abrasive relationship with my mother, when I analyze my life, how is my connection with any other woman? If I have trouble and I'm dealing with trauma and trying to understand the trauma and the suffering when I look at my family dynamic, how likely am I going to be to trust another individual that's trying to help me? So it gets them to see, okay, with an eco map, okay, the relationship. I use my brother for an example, and I had played a very vivid, I would say, clip that he sent me. And during the clip, he's literally saying how if I was around him, he would shoot me. He like it's a very vivid video recording. And when they looked at me, I was like, okay, now let's separate. Let's look at the connection. You have to analyze some it's hard. I wouldn't even say it's hard because a lot of times when people say things are hard, it gives them an excuse. But anytime you want to change in life, you're going to be faced with adversity, with a challenge. That's how you grow.
Mhm.
So even looking at it, yes, looking at the title, and that's what I showed them. Okay, the title, he's my brother. The titles that we generate for people that we're connected to comes with an emotional attachment. If he's my brother, I expect that he won't do this. I expect that he won't say this. Why? Because he's my brother versus looking at who he is as an individual. So
Right.
I even show them, okay, let's remove the brother out of it. When I assess my kids, I have 2 sons, I have 3 daughters. I know what I have suffered. I know what I've endured through life. When I look at the next generation and I look at my kids, is his behavior, his demeanor, how he normally acts day to day. Are those the same characteristics I want my sons to grow up one day and emulate? No.
Right.
When my daughters grow up and they come to me on that dreadful morning day, Dad, I have a boyfriend. Would I want those same characteristics to be and the type of people that they're attracted to? No. So then now I'm assessing the relationship I have with another individual by removing my emotion out of it and just looking at the factual base of the individual. If we were able, if society was able to do that, how much further would it advance them? A lot of times people get so emotionally triggered after helping so many people. And when you sit down with them, ask them, why did you get burned out or why did you stop? A lot of times you hear how, oh, we tried to help this amount of people and it didn't go nowhere. What did you assess? Like, were they really trying to change? Were you just going off their interaction, what they were saying? When you assess that individual, do they even show you that they wanted to change? Or were they actually just prying into your emotion and to make you feel better?
Yeah.
So that one question I asked them, if you, I tell everyone, I want you to think of every single social, I think we talked about this, but if you think about every single social problem that has ever been created in the existence of humanity, every one of those social problems has one common denominator, which is the exact same common denominator that 99% of people battle with every single day. And for a lot of people, it has literally turned them from their own entire belief system. And it's only one word: emotion.
Yeah.
Emotion can allow you and get you to see things in a whole different perspective than what it really is. It can make you feel a certain type of way, it can make you think. But how can emotion make you think when logic is supposed to be at the height of emotional intelligence? But because people are so triggered, because we're human, they don't take that extra step. to get through. When we talk about, and we hear all the time, the theory of an onion, especially in mental health, you take the onion and you peel the layers. What layers are you peeling?
All the surface stuff till you get to the core.
Exactly. But when I ask people, what is your core? What are you searching for? And I tell people in a more, I guess you could say, generalized approach. I get people to look at their life. If you remember the old movie, The Mask with Jim Carrey, through the duration of that movie, the more times he put that mask on, the more that mask started conforming. Then before you know it, that mask conformed him. So when we're talking about the theory and we're going through the theory of the onion, wouldn't that relate to the trauma and the mask that we put on ourselves? When we were kids, when we were children, how many people still are living out the dreams and the manifestations that we said to ourselves as kids? How many people, this happened, I have to put on a mask. I have to put on this defense
Mm-hmm.
because everything in emotion is 180 of logic. So if I'm thinking this is a defense, now it makes me strong. Now realizing vulnerability is the true strength.
Yeah,
So when you look at it, okay, I put that mask on. This person, you go out, they break your heart. Oh, I got to put this mask on. This employer did this. I got to put this. Now multiply it 10, 15, 20, 30 years. And then by the time people actually get to the point of actually wanting to try to find out where that core is, oh, I removed 2 or 3 layers. Yeah, how many more layers do you have to go?
sure.
And it shows itself within communication. Those same people who struggle with going through those layers within their own life, how well are they at actually having debatable conversations? When we're talking about those tough questions, tough conversations that we have in society, how well are they to hear the differences of opinions, the disagreements? How well are they able to conduct themselves rather than going off or having to yell or having to get emotional or walking out or all the stuff that we normally see people do? Well, when you assess their life, how well were they doing that within themselves? So if they're struggling to do that within themselves, how can I ever think that they'll be able to do it with other people?
Sure.
So when we talk about this system that is controlling us all, and it's the government, it's this and this, and or maybe it's just the psychological system within your own mind. The difference between me sitting on my couch every day saying, I want to do this, this, and this, and versus the entrepreneur is just the fact that he did it. took the steps.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was just with emotional connection. That's just week 2. So going into week 3, it's a deeper dive.
Sure.
You're going into genograms. So when you're looking at your life and you look at your siblings and the relationships, genograms is constructed to show the connection, how everything connects. So with the youth, and this is one of the biggest things I use with the youth, especially when I was working at the juvenile prison, start tracking your understanding in your life. If you're here in prison and your dad went to prison and your granddaddy went to prison and your grandma went to prison and that person went to prison, that might be your system.
Yeah.
So then take that system. Okay, how do they think? How do they live their day-to-day lives? When I sit down and I look at what I want to be in life, the best that I want to be, do they represent that? Do they emulate it? Or is it just because of an emotion? Because they're family? Going right back to the emotion. So if I'm seeing and I'm tracking and I'm able to see the system, if everyone followed the same system and there was no growth, how can I switch the mindset to create my own system?
And that's what you've created.
Yes. This program does, it goes and takes a person through that every step of, and it's more for them. This program is as beneficial as that person is going to be honest with themselves.
Yes.
And I told them with the Open Door Food Kitchen, the first thing I told them, I've been there, I did it. I've been homeless. I've slept on my dad's grave. I've ate out of trash can. I've been where you're at. You can lie to me all you want. I'm not the type of presenter that's going to get up here and get so excited because the person that you can't lie to is yourself. And a lot of reasons why y'all are stuck in the predicament you're in is because you still have not been honest with yourself.
Yeah.
So it gives them that different perspective. But then it shows them, okay, I know how it is. The 5 steps to change. First step is denial. So even when we step outside of the micro aspect and even look at more of the meso or the macro, when we look at COVID, COVID impacted this entire world. Psychologically, what did COVID do?
Made us fear.
For a lot of people, it put them in their first step and first stage of change. I tell people when Michael Jackson first came out with Man in the Mirror, it was a great song. We all danced to it. It had a nice tune. COVID made the world sit in their own home. And for a lot of people in society, they finally got to meet their man and woman in the mirror.
Yeah.
And that person started talking. So the first thing is what? Denial. Why do I have to say my demons and tell all the negativity about my life and they're not doing it? Why do I have to be the good person anymore when they're not doing it? Why do I have to admit just how horrible of a person I really am if the people around me aren't doing it? So now I just go into a survival mindset, which then pulls the humanity away. And we see it play out in society now. That's the reason why we have a society that is more victimized than ever before. Everybody wants pity. Nobody wants to take accountability.
Right.
Everybody puts the critical issues on the next person. The first step of change. Until we get into the mindset of acceptance. With elementary mindset, this was literally designed based on what I've actually survived. People who know my story, they know that I went from living in North Carolina, being homeless, to moving to Hayes, Kansas, where I was running for city commissioner the year I moved here to St. Joseph. Those are two totally different mindsets.
Yes. Yes,
So
they
then when we're
are.
looking with the open door kitchen, they're actually no different than the juveniles in a sense because of the level of comprehension. And I even tell the people on my team, like on social media, with diverse perspectives, I have to kind of be careful because if I go out into certain demographics, they're not going to comprehend me sitting down having this scale of a conversation. Why? They've never been in that environment to successfully educate or learn. So my demeanor, my verbiage, my attitude, to meet them where they're at when I deal with my professional life, those people will actually find that offensive. Some of them would say that is beneath my character because the difference in understanding.
Yeah.
So how can you incorporate to where people understand those differences? The difference in going into a school where a high performing school, they're going to expect a presentation filled with elegance, nice mental health conversations, uh, mental health terminology, the things that we're taught in college. What about the lane worker, the laid worker who is working a 9 to 5 that has never been to college? The worker that's going to retire from McDonald's. They're not able to comprehend to that level. So, how can we meet them? One of the things when I was running for city commissioner was okay, let's analyze your community. Communities are ran off sales tax.
Mhm.
So if we started, now, again, I've been there. There are some people that are homeless that just want to be homeless. There are people that are in impoverished environments that enjoy living in impoverished. That's understandable. But within those groups are small pockets of people who just need an opportunity. If we can reach them, we can get them the education, the skill sets. We can get them attached to the necessary programs. Now they become more skilled, qualified workers.
Mm-hmm.
Their revenue increases. Therefore, the investment within your society increases. And if you start where society would consider the bottom, the people that don't listen, you can't connect to them. The stereotypes that we constantly hear, you can't connect with the younger generation. Those you know, all homeless people, they just want to be homeless. All people with mental illness, they ain't got no mental illness. They just lazy. Are you sure about that? But when we get those people and get them the actual trainings and stuff, how impactful do their stories become? How many people
Important.
are they able to reach that we weren't able to? How much can we grow? Because if other people start seeing those populations grow, it's going to automatically tap into our natural nature. Hold on, they're growing. I got to step my game up. I got. Isn't that the whole basis and the original construction of competition?
I would say so, yes.
I don't want to beat you when you're at your weakest. I don't want to. I don't even want to entertain it if you don't feel good. No, I want you to be at your best. So when I beat you, you know I beat you at your best.
Mm-hmm.
So what is that going to do? That's going to fuel you to work harder. Hey, he beat me. All right, cool. I'm going to beat him the next time, which is going to put in my head, okay, I beat him. He's going to want to beat me. I have to make sure. Now we're progressing. What happens when emotion is added? How much does something that could be so simple become so detrimental? And when we look into our society today, which reality do we see? What are the battles that we see? Do we see the loving competition or do we see emotion?
Mostly emotion.
And that's the thing about that was one of the founding things with creating an elementary. When I started seeing that emotions is like a hamster wheel. A hamster can get on his hamster wheel and he can run, jump, skip as fast or slow as he wants to for as long as he wants to until he finally gets tired enough to get off the wheel. However, even when he decides to do that, he still finds himself in the same position. Just like how we operate with emotion. Because even in a hamster wheel, you have a high and a low. So every time a person gets to that high, how many people stay there? Or how many people cycle through? It would actually make it easier for that hamster to get off the wheel and just crawl beside the hamster wheel. When we get into emotion, we spiral. And it's not until we're slung out or until we have no other option for us to then start thinking logically. But if we're trained and we're taught, especially um, like in the college communities and the middle class, and these are skill sets that are taught. You get knocked down, you climb. It's a staircase. You keep climbing. It's not lateral. It's not linear. You're going to have ups and downs. How do we stop from plummeting and say, okay, yes, I may need to have taken 1 or 2 steps down to see clearer. So now when I make those steps higher, I know how to climb better. How many people have the discipline or even just the knowledge of knowing how to do so? And if they were taught those skills, what would that do for their life?
Drastically improve it, I'm sure.
So yes, and even with going back to the elementary mindset, I also have one of the weeks. I always have a guest presenter because I tell people, despite some public opinion, I'm nobody special. I'm just someone who survived. I've had 13 psychiatrists tell me I've had the worst case of psychological trauma they've ever seen in their careers. And even got to the point where professionals were like, is there a way that you can teach people how to be more resilient? Resiliency is the discipline of emotion. It's the ambition to keep going when all else fails.
Hmm.
So the way to teach resilience is to get people to stop fearing those things that they know that they need to do. You know you need to go make amends with that person. You know you need to forgive that person. You know you need to right that wrong. What's stopping you from doing it? And when you get out, if you separate your emotion from it, does it make sense the way that you're moving? Because logic, everything adds up. Emotion creates a gray area. And a lot of people in society uses those gray areas as a way to manipulate, to change directions. That leads to increase of emotional trauma, disappointment. And once a person feels enough of that, they stop hoping. They
Yes.
stop believing. They stop striving. They start taking their life as it is. And in life, you're going to do 1 or 2 things. You're either going to excel or you're going to decline. And even if you're going stagnant, after a while, you're still going to decline. How many people understand and know the systems that control them? Again, going back to human dynamics, some people don't care. But you have a greater population of people that want to be different. They want to change. They want to try to figure these things out. It's just they don't know where to start. That's why when I bring up the onion theory and people, hey, yeah, it goes to the core. The core of what? because the core is actually the essence of who you are as an individual. When you were born, when we were a child, yeah, you were living in your core. It was the most vibrant of you. And then as you live, the layers started to build. So how far are you willing to go to see the core within yourself? Because with every layer, it gets thicker, it gets bigger. Are you going to stop? Or are you going to keep going? Because if I'm working on my onion and I got 300 layers, and you're working on your onion with 300 layers, when we actually sit down and talk, the last thing we have to do is sit and compare and contrast in a negative way. By the time you get to those deeper layers, you want somebody to help understand.
Sure.
So now our
Absolutely.
conversation becomes, hey, you dealing with this? Oh, you got through it? Can you help me? Oh, you went through that? Can you help? Now we're building. We're no longer being trauma bonded. We're working through our trauma together.
Yeah.
That's how we build as people. That's how we build as humanity. But a lot of times we get so fixated because there are negative people here in society. There are ugly people in the world. So we try to protect ourselves by, and I get it a lot. Demetrius, your mental health. Yeah. What are your qualifications and what master degrees do you have? And you got to prove yourself. And yeah, I've lived it. And you can see it. So wouldn't it make more for us to start looking at the individuals more versus the generalizations that we have constructed or followed for so long that has literally shifted our perception on each other? When are we going to get back to where we can have difference in opinion? You can vote for Trump. I cannot like Trump. That is a political. Doesn't mean, oh, you're a horrible person because, or you're a weakling because, no. I can't have my own opinion, but we teach it. We push it into the, but do we actually live it? And when we look at the younger generations that are coming before us, what are we teaching them? Because a lot of them are falling to our negligence. With every generation that refuse to accept and to grow and to empower, their youth, their generations have been suffered. And it's so long, a person can only cry out for so long before they stop crying.
Right.
And then what happens? That emotion turns into anger. A human's mind is not developed until 25. And they actually started increasing it to 27. We're talking about youth. But a lot of times we judge them as if they're adults.
Yeah.
So we're losing the same bridge of communication. Because everything, all of elementary brings you back to one specific thing, and that's balance. The better a person is able to balance the environment and the people around them, to balance their emotions, to balance their understanding, that's how you grow. No matter how intelligent I am, if I have balance, I also have humbleness. So that means I'm still teachable. That means I'm still learning. If I would turn those lessons into narcissism, if I allow emotion to kick in, I become egotistical. Now, everything is revolved around me, which is no different than what you demonize the lower population and communities. Same system, just on opposite ends.
Yeah.
So when we take all of these different scenarios and theories and concepts, how simple is it when you break it down and divide all of it by emotion?
Okay. We have just a couple more minutes left. I appreciate everything you've said. I think you've gotten really in depth with what your program is offering. Could you just really quickly, if you want to, um,
Hmm?
kind of give us a step by step of what the program entails, like what each week a person would encounter?
Yes, I actually have that. And while I'm pulling it up, I've designed this program in two different ways. I have a 9-week program designed for youth. I've also turned this into a 6-week program for adults that
Gotcha.
takes them through this technology. So, starting out, a person would come in with our introduction. This is a time for them to really just start understanding the differences and similarities of people. I have different activities that I do that show that we are more alike than we are different, whether it's through education, through the justice system, through just basic mental health and being human. That takes a person through getting them to see where they're at now. And it's kind of like, okay, here's where you're at now. Now let's take a journey all the way back from the beginning to see why you're where you're at. So going into the connections, understanding the structures, the systems, the attachments that we have with one another. Again, whether that's being with family, with individuals, getting them to first at least talk about it, actually start verbalizing and seeing it, which then leads to the next week, which is again the eco maps and genograms, where it's specifically okay, we've talked about it, we've discussed it. Now let's take that next step where you're actually writing it down. You're actually able to see. Um, I have to say, I learned that method in 2016. I suffered a full psychotic break, and it was actually on accident. My friend, he's a minister, and during that time in my 20s, he was just like, Demetrius, you've been through more than, he was like, you always dealt with the issue. You never dealt with the emotion. And during that time, every single emotion hit my brain at one time. So you can imagine how that ended.
Mm-hmm.
But then it taught me, okay, you can't have people can't just let it all out. You have to do it in layers. But they first have to talk about it. They have to get it out. They have to verbalize it. And then get them to write it out. That's the basis of therapy. And that's why I educate people and I promote go to therapy. Get out your own way of, oh, their job is to like help me and they're supposed to do this like they're waving a magic wand. No. Therapists and psychiatrists are put in place to hear you and help you. You are the master of your story. It's to help you find logic in everything that you're going through. Then it takes a more deeper dive into the mask. So by the time they're at week 4 or 5, we're actually into the mask, going deeper into why these masks were created. Why do you think the way that you think? Why do you react the way that you do? Going back and tracking, where did it start? Once a person is able to visualize and see the trauma, they're actually able to see the system. That's when you can learn how to change it. If I seen that my system was full of negativity, trauma, deceit, despair, and it has followed me, by the time I get to college and I have people saying, I want to help you, I'm going to reject it because it doesn't follow the same structure that I was accustomed. So it gets people to follow that even deeper. That's the reason why, after going as in depth, I also have them take a break. And 1 week, they actually have a guest presenter, someone that's already dealt with it, someone that's already been through it, someone that's successful, that's overcame the trauma. When people are able to see that more people, you know what, they went through it. If they overcame it, I can. It started reinitiating and reigniting the pure origin of that competition theory. And then once they get there, we end it with now, okay, now that we've got through everything, what are your goals? What are your dreams for the future? If you've seen the systems that have held you, if you can see how emotion has kept you stagnated, we've been able to map out and get all the way to the root and the cause of it. Now that you have a different perspective, now what are your goals and dreams of life going to be? What are your objectives? What are your visions? Now that you overcame and you dealt with emotions and is empowering you to be different and to advance, it doesn't stop there. You still got to live. But now you have emotion, you have time, you have energy to dream again, to find purpose. That becomes contagious. And that spreads throughout communities. And if we're not careful, that actually might change communities, which is the basis of why we're in mental health in the first place.
Very nice. Thank you so much, Demetrius, for speaking with us tonight.
Oh,
I
definitely.
look forward to following your programs and what you're doing throughout the community. I think you have a really good program going here, And I'm not exactly sure what all Diversified Perspectives does, but from what I can see, I kind of follow you on Facebook. Sounds like you're doing some really good stuff.
Hopefully, I'm connecting, and that's the biggest thing. There's different pockets of people from the entertainment to
Hmm.
profession. Yeah, but everybody's people.
Yeah.
And once people actually have these conversations with me, they actually start to understand diverse perspectives even better. Because I don't have to agree with your platform. I don't have to do nothing. I could just support you. And through the support, through those connections, hopefully you see how my demeanor or the characteristics of the people I have around me in my natural state or professional, and it would just impact you and empower you to change yourself. And then we continue to grow.
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you so much. I look forward to seeing you around town.
All right. And uh can't wait to see you around town too.
Okay, Demetrius, you have a good night. We appreciate you coming on the show.
All right, you're welcome and you do as well.
Okay, bye-bye.